You were talking about money, right?
Separate yourself widely from the pack moving forward. Is that something that you would be willing to have a discussion about?
Because they didn't get it.
They
were
probably
like,
didn't get it. Yeah.
To follow up with your clients, to generate more leads. You know what I mean?
Always check to make sure you're recording.
The record.
Yeah.
Welcome back to another episode of Key Factors Podcast. I'm Mark Jones, your host, and we are powered by ReviewMyMortgage.com, the largest index of mortgage programs nationally. And today we've got a pretty hot topic with two pretty hot guests. And I think it's going to be educational for many, but mostly the Black demographics. So first, let me introduce our guest today. I've got Brian Paris. Brian, how are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Doing very well. And then I've also got my brother, Preston Jones, back for another episode. Preston, what's up, dude?
Not much. Just excited for this topic today.
Awesome. So first off, we've already kind of gone through in previous episode who Preston is, all that jazz. So I want to start with Brian. Brian, you have been a realtor for quite some time now and very well respected in the community. Within a lot of the social groups that I see you in, you give a great opinion, a great perspective, and very educational and insightful on the topics that come out of there. Matter of fact, some of the questions that you have are a bit higher level than what most realtors out there are talking about.
Thank you.
The situations that your customers are in and the way that you're able to help them get through those things where other realtors would typically fall out, in my opinion. So I'm bringing you on as multiple reasons, not only an experienced realtor, but also an experienced Black realtor. And tell us about yourself a little bit. You've been here for what, 25 years or so?
I've been in San Antonio 28 years. I came down from New York. I worked for Citibank back in the day, and they moved the call center from New York to San Antonio.
Okay.
And they said, Brian, you can either find another job or move to Texas. Now, back in the 90s, moving to Texas,
yeah,
but the
right?
quality of life here and the fact that I had a good position, I kept my New York salary, made it worthwhile to stay.
Okay, that makes sense. So back in New York, what was life like in New York? I mean, you weren't in real estate just then. Did you grow up in New York?
Yes.
Okay. What was that like growing up in New York, the jungle, as they call it?
I say New York, you can do whatever you want, good or bad. Everybody's got something they have to do. So the general idea of New York is they're rude and always, but we've got someplace to go.
That's true. And that's funny that you say New York rude. The first time, and I used to go to New York quite often, at least once a month. And the first time I got in a cab, I'm talking to him, having a good time with him. And he said, "You're from Texas, aren't you?" And I went, "How did you know that?" He said, you're too nice. You're too nice. And I went, "Oh my gosh, that's how you are able to determine that we're from Texas? That's impressive." But at the same time, who do you deal with?
when the first calls came in from San Antonio, the general mindset from the consumers was they're very nice. They don't know anything, but they're very nice.
Right. That's crazy. So I know that you've got a pretty strong family. You got your wife and 5 children. Is that correct?
Between she and I, we have 5 daughters.
5, all daughters. Wow, that's like my grandfather. He had 4 daughters, and they're all crazy, including my mom. So that being said, what led you to jump into real estate once you got it?
Real estate was, when I was one of those clients that would go to all the open houses, that would just go look at houses and just fall in love with the architecture and what do I like about it. And I love helping people. So it was a natural marriage of the two. I like helping people and like looking at houses and, man, realtor, that sounds good.
Match made in heaven. Very good. So how long have you been doing or practicing real estate?
13 years.
13 years. And you have a team, and I know it's a very successful team. What keeps you going in this business, this crazy world that we live in and work in, and in my opinion, I love as well. But what keeps you going in it?
Well, for me, I love helping people, and I believe I can sell whatever I wanted. But to know that I have a hand in one of the biggest transactions in somebody's life, that I'm helping change the course of a family, that makes me feel really good. When I have that person who was renting before, now they're owning their first home. When I've got somebody who's leaving the family home to downsize, those are, to me, landmark transactions that, to be a part of is really, really, really good.
Absolutely. No, and I agree. Now, let me ask, do you work with a lot of first-time home buyers, or is it mixed in your demographic? And if so, what obviously, what is your goal in getting new customers, if that makes
So
sense?
most of my business now is repeat clients. So clients that I've helped several years ago, they're either upsizing or downsizing or they're referring family members. So most of mine is 99% referral business, which is kind of where you want to be in real estate.
Recession proof, in my opinion. Yeah, because at the end of the day, I think the new wealth has to do with real estate. And I think folks are figuring it out more and more the more we do things like this to educate and help them understand that the generational wealth gap can be filled with real estate, and it takes time, right? So that being said, let's talk about today's market for just a bit before we get into our hot topic. What's going on in real estate?
And it is a seller's market. So I get the question all the time or hear the comment that it's going to be a bubble that bursts. Oh my God, the bubble's going to burst. This is not a bubble from my perspective. There is a true supply and demand issue. San Antonio's got a great economy, so it draws a lot of people to San Antonio. You've got the military bases. You've got Austin, which is 2 hours away. You've got so many different factors drawing people to San Antonio, which automatically creates demand. So what happens with supply? COVID says, well, interest rates are 2.9%. The person that was going to sell their home because they're at 4.9, they said, hey, I'll just refinance and keep my house. That takes inventory out of the conversation. Those people that realize now they're working from home, they need that full, true study so they can work from home, and they're living in a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house that doesn't work, so now that increases demand. So when you have not enough supply but an overabundance of demand, you have what we are right now.
Absolutely, yeah, and prices. And I do a lot of research lately with doing these podcast episodes and the updates that I do on the YouTube channel. And I'm finding that our values in Texas are unlike any other state, in my opinion. Maybe we'll say Florida, very close or similar, I should say. But I have to agree with you. I don't believe that there's going to be a bubble. I don't think that we're going to see 19%, 20% increase year over year like we have, because that there was, unless we have another pandemic or something that is going to shut us down the way that it did, I don't see us having that type of year over year value.
No, what I tell my clients is the rate of appreciation will slow down. You know, you're going to hit a point where you buy your house this year and 4 or 5 years later, you may see that growth that we're seeing in 1 or 2 years, but I don't think it's going to be the same level of growth. So real estate is a long-term plan. 5, 6, 7. Well, 5, 6, 7 used to be. 8, 9, 10 is probably where you would expect it to be.
And I think you're right on the money. I mean, here in Texas, and I can only speak for Texas, we've had an average of anywhere from 4 to 6% year over year growth consistently. And even through the previous debacle, the crash of 2008, we didn't lose value here. It was almost we were the outlier in that. So when it comes to today's market, I'm hearing the same chatter about there's going to be a crash, there's going to be a bubble, and you go, how do you make that make sense?
The one thing that I noticed also back in 2008, we had so in order for this to be a bubble, there has to be a major influx of inventory that can come from foreclosures. But back in 2008, the only option you had if you didn't keep up with your mortgage was foreclosure. In today's market, you have deed in lieu, you have, we'll put the past due balance to the end. There are so many other programs that are out there to keep sellers in their home. And the other thing that's different too is that right now, those sellers that are struggling, they have equity. So it'll hit the market like everything else, but we're not going to see that major influx of foreclosures that's going to cause a total shift in the market, and it's not, I don't see it.
I believe you're right on the money. And I think looking back 2 years ago when the delinquency rate went up to about 6-7%, everybody's freaking out. And then you fast forward 2 years, and now we're back down to 2-3% default rate. That tells me that the folks that are homeowners and the folks that us as lenders pre-qualified did a damn good job of doing what they needed to do to keep their home in place. And I think historically, Texas does a great job of that regardless. If you look at the entire nation and foreclosure rates and things of that nature, Texans pay their home No matter what, they're going to pay their home. But it gives me faith in humanity that they're not just letting things go.
That's one of the other factors about the inventory. So when we talk about foreclosures, I know that lenders and loan officers and everybody in the lending side of things are being held to the fire. Why does loan go under foreclosure? So whereas back 2008, you had a pulse, you had a couple of bucks, you can get a mortgage. Those days are long gone. So the homeowners that have homes now, because they qualified, and you guys did a good job of making sure that they qualify, because we don't want to see a repeat of 2008.
No. And you know what? I don't think that the U.S. government wants to see a repeat of that either. You know what I mean? So they're going to do what it takes by implementing forbearance plans, stimulus packages, things of that nature to ensure that at least that doesn't happen again. And why I say that is because our world, regardless of whether you know it or not, we're going to say it here, our world is driven by mortgage-backed securities and real estate. That's what it is. So Preston and I were not in the business in 2008, 2009. Were you were in the business then?
Just got in 2009.
What was that like? I just want to get some perspective on that as much as I can.
So we had to understand, the foreclosure process. People, hey, I want to buy a foreclosure. That sounds great. So you have to go to the courthouse steps and all that stuff. But then if the lender gets it, it goes back to the lender maybe months before it hits the market. So, understanding what short sales are and how those work, and those may take months. So having those tools in your tool belt as a realtor made it really easy for other opportunities to come up.
You to continue to try. Very good. That's very cool. I mean, you hear a lot of folks that got out of the business at that point in time, both on the lending and real estate side. And I do believe that we're getting into something similar to that, not because of foreclosures or anything like that, but because of technology, because of ease of access, because the demographic that's purchasing these days damn near do it all through their phone. I mean, Zoom call to go see the home. It's ridiculous. Yeah. Matter of fact, the last home that I sold, they bought it sight unseen. And I'm like, is this going to go through? Matter of fact, it did. Got more than what we should have.
So during COVID, agents, the agents that were on their game, they did the video walkthroughs, and they were there at the inspection. So we had to add another layer of customer mindset to our skill set. It's not just open a door and let them buy it and call it a day. You had to really be engaged with your client to make sure they're making the right ideas, making the right decisions. So, those that are persevering right now, they have that extra level of skill.
There you go. Yeah, no, and I like to call it, some people say thinking outside of the box. I call it having a bigger box to think in.
I like using that idea.
So that being said, I want to get a little bit more insight on your passions and what you're doing these days. And I know you love coaching, helping others. Are you growing a team? What is your plans as of right now, and how do you incorporate that passion into what you're doing?
Okay, so I have two young ladies on my team, Venus Marshall and Yashika Warrior. We just really started this team a couple of years ago, and just learning through the bumps. And when you go from an individual contributor where I can jack up my own account, I can jack up my own business, okay, but when you take somebody else on, it's like, oh man.
It's still your name, but it's somebody else doing it.
And it's their business.
Yes.
And they are the primary, breadwinners. So I've got to make sure that when we implement something, it can't just be, oh yeah, let's just try it and see what happens. Oh, it didn't work. Damn, that sucks. Sorry.
Yeah, no. I've been through that. Trust me, growing teams and reshaping teams, it's tough. I think the toughest part is the delegation piece, where you're used to doing what you're used to doing, and now you're having to empower someone else to do what you do, but there's only one you.
So taking their DNA and incorporating that into the process. Both of these ladies have helped me understand a lot more about something than just what's in my head. So I really appreciate what they bring to the table, because I have a certain color and they put another color in, I put another, and then between the three of us, we have a really nice color.
I like that. Yeah, that is awesome. So you mentioned color and you mentioned different perspective. Should we get into a talk about color and perspective? I like it. Okay, so there was a video that Preston and I put out regarding an article that we had come across, and it had to do with disparity in the mortgage business with Black folks. And I know that, in my opinion, there's not a better group of folks to talk about this than who I have in this room today. Respectfully, with experience, and again, different perspectives on the topic. So I guess elephant in the room, what are your thoughts on what's going on with our demographic? Because I will say we are the lowest in regards to home ownership. And I think what bugs me about it is the way that the media goes about portraying that versus the way that they maybe could portray
Yep,
it.
I tend to agree with that. Okay, so elephant in the room, the story or the narrative is African Americans get approved for loans less than the other minorities. Now, there may be some factual data to that, but here's the thing. Are there things that our culture is doing that is hurting those scores? Are there things that are happening based on education? I had a period of time where I was using payday loans.
Hey, you and me both.
So
We've been there.
So
And which is why I believe we can talk about
Right.
this, because Preston, myself, I don't know your background, but we didn't come from
no,
money.
neither did I. I grew up in the Bronx.
There you go. And furthermore, and before you keep going, is it silly of me to not really like the connotation of African American versus Black American? And the reason why I say that is I've been to Africa. I've seen the motherland. I've participated in rebuilding a school for them. It was a very cool, enlightening experience. And I'm talking, the gentleman beside me was wearing church shoes, and I turned to him and I said, "Why are you wearing such nice shoes?" He said, "These are the only shoes I got." Meanwhile, he's got a cell phone with Facebook on it. So I'm not from Africa. Are you from Africa?
But no, not me personally, no.
Do you get what I'm
I
saying?
understand. So I guess with me and coming from New York,
Sure.
I will use the term African American.
Okay.
It flows smoother.
Sure.
Yes, I don't know why I feel.
And I think I do sometimes and sometimes
Yeah.
not. I don't know why that is.
So I mean, to me,
It's too super side note.
personal
Sorry.
choice. You call me
Okay.
Black, okay, that's fine. Call me African American. I'm not gonna get offended. It doesn't bother me either way.
Gotcha.
But some do say, hey, no, I'm not from Africa, so don't call me that. Okay, well, that's fine.
Yeah, I get it. I
don't
get
think
it.
that's okay.
But don't you drop that in.
Absolutely
Yeah. So when it comes to the credit, I think there are, and you're right, sometimes the narrative is put out there to incite feelings, and like you said, there may be a hidden agenda to it, and I don't know that agenda either. But I do know that, there are things that we can do in our culture that can help bring people up. I know that for sure. When we were growing up, and no offense to my mom or my dad, but we didn't learn about credit. We didn't learn about the 30%, utilization. We didn't learn about these things in school. So when we are out here trying to make it on our own, we're gonna make mistakes. I had American Express card at 19 years old. What the hell was I thinking? So I lived through that. Well, darn, I messed up. I didn't pay my bills, and now I'm down to a 585 score. So I can understand if I were to go to apply for a mortgage, then I'm going to get turned down. Okay, so did anybody sit down and teach me how to use credit? Did anybody sit down and say, hey, you know what, we're going to make sure that you have good credit by putting your name on my credit card? Didn't learn that.
Likewise.
So-
No, you're right.
So how do we get that information out to those who need it? So my daughters, I'd much rather help them with their down payment on their house than to buy the dress. So, let's work at, not even at 18, let's work at 16, at 15 on how to manage money. Let's talk about the rule of 72 and how you can get the best bang for your buck when you're making savings deposits. Let's talk about getting you a 700 credit score when you're 18 years old. So that way, when it's time for that house to be bought, you already know everything you know to be successful. A lot of it is just education.
I love that. I mean, I agree wholeheartedly with that. It's tough to see all of the things. And I took some time last night and a couple of days ago, and then previous to that, Preston, when you and I were doing that article, to look up statistics, data, because I don't like taking anybody's word for anything. Let me go get the data, formulate my own opinion, and figure out what's going on here. So when I was going through that stuff, and I want to talk about some of these stats that I have here, we've got credit score averages by race, and this is based in the United States. And what I found odd is there, not that I know of, there isn't anywhere that hones in per state based on race. It was just a generic over the United States. I think that's strange. Why? I don't know. But based on this, we've got Asian Americans that are at an average credit score of 745, white Americans average credit score of 734, other, which, I mean, what else do you put in there? Mixed race, maybe? This is where you and I fall. And then we've got Hispanics at 701, and then Black Americans at 677. Now, something that I wanted to add to this is the following. We're talking about credit, and we think, okay, 677, that's not bad. That's not a bad average credit score.
I'm excited
I have
to see
to
that.
agree. Likewise, right? But then you come down here and you say the percentage of borrowers with credit scores below 620, and look at the huge gap that we see here. Asian Americans, only 2.6% are below 620. We've got Hispanic / white individuals that are 11.2%. Non-Hispanic, so just white folks, at 5.4. Your other category at 6.3. And then you've got our Black African Americans at 21.3%. And I think that confirms your point to the education and the generational discussions that are happening or not happening within our world. I mean, what are your...
So I think there are other factors that go along with it. You know, when we add to the fact that when we look at households, how many African-American families are female-led? And if I have a choice of feeding my kids or paying my car note, I'm going to feed my kids. So some of it is I don't have a choice because I'm not making it. You know, we talk about the wage gap with women versus men. We talk about, like I said before, just the variance of, you know, single moms leading the household and not being able to teach them because you're just trying to make it through the month. I think those things play into that 21.3% and play into.
And I have to agree. I mean, they don't break it down like that, but looking at it, yes, it's either a large group of that going on, because I only know what I know, and I do know plenty of single African-American ladies that are doing their thing, that are working their butts off to make it happen. Not just get by, but thrive if they can. But then at the same time, I look at an article, and let me see if I can find this real quick just to talk about. Okay, right here, there's an article on creditcards.com. It says, Black American, the road to good credit score and rewarding good credit may not always be as smooth. Although credit score systems is designed to be objective, studies have shown that people of color are more likely to struggle with credit than their white counterparts. And then it goes on, and it's a quote from the money coach. Her name is Lynette Clefani Cox, and she says there's an access gap, there's an information gap, and there's an advisory gap. So if we break those down, is there an access gap?
It depends on what the access is. So is it access to the...
Access to credit. Access to credit. It's a generic access to credit. It's a tough one.
It is a tough one. Because
Many people aren't going to like this response.
So the challenge is, okay, so I'm at that 620 score, okay?
Okay.
And I apply for the American Express card. That gives me a 2.9% interest rate.
Mm-hmm.
Will I get approved? I don't know. Maybe
I don't know.
when I go
Right.
apply for a car note. Oh, Brian, you're at and this happened. Brian, I'm sorry, you're at a 578, but we will give you this card at 18% interest. So if somebody walks in with a 700 credit score, they're at 2.9%. So more dollars per payment go toward interest. So that does affect everything else.
I
And
agree
turn
with
around
that.
and buy the car. Now the car is upside down. I still needed a car because it broke down. So now that 18% is now compiled on top of the car. Now I'm upside down again. So we have access to all the same programs, but the ones where we can actually leverage and take advantage of, because we should use credit as leverage, right? I want to be able to
Absolutely.
get a 2.9% interest rate on my house so that I can pay off higher debt. But if the debt that I'm getting is higher than what I'm already having, I'm not benefiting.
Right. You're kind of chasing your tail.
Right. So we have access, but it's not at the same benefit, if I will say.
And I'll agree to a certain extent. I will say that I think it starts in the beginning, because when we come out, graduate from college, even pre-college, we all don't have a credit score. At the end of the day, we all go through that, hey, come sign up and get your college t-shirt and get your visa. And at that point, I think and where I do believe that they are accurate is the advisory piece, the household, the cultural standpoint of us and the way that credit is viewed in the beginning is what leads us to less credit access once we mess up the first one.
Because part of it is, from what I understand, okay, you know what? I've got a 580 credit score. I'm out of the credit game.
Yeah.
I'm not paying credit no more. Everything is cash. So whatever impact that nuclear bomb had back when I was 19, here I am 35. And you know what? I've got a little bit of money right now, but I still have a 580 credit score because I'm not playing the credit game because nobody taught me you got to get back in it.
That's right. And it's not something you should listen to Dave Ramsey about on this, guys.
Everything cash.
Yeah, just everything cash. Nope. And I think it's important for our listeners to know that if you don't come from money, and regardless if you come from money or not, you've got to leverage credit in order to make it in this world. It's not, you can go out and get a great job or create something and generate some wealth, but even still, your wealth, you better have enough money to buy your house cash, insurance cash, car cash, everything else. And that's just not a realistic task for folks these days.
And when you think about soft hits, where I'm applying for a high-level security job and I don't have a credit score, I have a low credit score, that impacts my ability to have a job.
That's so true.
Soft hits can play a role as well.
That is so true. Now, what are your thoughts on the culture that we have created? And this is not something that our generation, I think it is a lingering effect in regards to the culture of kind of what you're talking about, the way credit is treated. Because I remember a lot of relatives like dissing credit altogether, but now that I'm older, I know why. They messed it up. They messed it up and they didn't go backwards to try and fix it or to, but now that I'm in the mortgage business with the experience, I've helped quite a few of them. And now they're grateful for that and speaking a whole different tune. And we're talking older relatives that are now looking up to me, which I appreciate. And it's almost returning the favor, if that makes sense, because I grew up with them. But our culture, based on statistics, we are the folks that will finance some Jordans versus putting that money away and saving for down payment for a home. Or we will go and finance that vehicle at 18% because we couldn't get it, but then we'll go use our cash to put some dubs on it. And I'm just talking about data that I've been looking up, and I go, why is this, you know?
I think, and my family did this tour. We went through houses in some affluent neighborhood. I don't know if it was the Dominion or somewhere where I couldn't afford it. But we noticed the cars that were in the driveway. And you saw, Mercedes over here, but I saw Fords, I saw Escorts, I saw cars that didn't show the wealth of the person living in the house.
Right.
And you go to other areas where, there may not be the same level of satisfaction in the house,
right?
But you see a lot more expensive cars. Why is that? It could be that for whatever reason, and you can almost tell somebody who's new money. When you see somebody with new money, they wear it.
They wear it. Wow, that's a great way to put that. I was talking to my wife last night, and that's kind of the way that she put it to me. I mean, my wife is white American. She's white as can be. She's from Missouri. But she said what you find is, and she said, you correct me if I'm wrong, but you find that they wear and are more proud of jewelry, of the shoes, of the flash versus the home.
I'm going to put in the sports analogy. When you've had a team that is used to winning, when they win, what happens?
Nothing. They're used to winning. Touche. Okay.
You have a team that is not used to winning, and they win. It's like they won the World Series.
Yeah.
So, when we come from having to struggle, seeing my grandparents struggle, now I feel that I can do something. I want to buy my mom that car that she never had. I want to do certain things for my family that they never had. So I can understand that perspective, but
Likewise, I can
we do
too.
have to be mindful about what our kids do. My wife's gonna kill me, but the first car my daughter's gonna.
Does she know you're here?
Yeah, I think she
Right.
does. Yeah.
I'm like,
But my first car was a beater. It was a '72 Datsun 240Z.
okay.
Loved that car.
Yeah.
But when our daughters they come of age, I'm like, hey, just get them a $5,000 car. No, we gotta get them. Oh, okay, all right. Well,
Mm-hmm.
So I think about it like that too. When we start becoming affluent, we want to wear that success in the car that we drive or the clothes that we wear, showing other people. But those who are used to having money.
And you know what? I can relate to that because back when I got my first vehicle, it was a hand-me-down, 1989 Maxima. And it was my dad's. He drove it like nobody's business. And he's very, what is the word? Frugal. Like he does not spend money on nothing at all. He'll wear shirts with holes in them because he don't care what people think about him.
Right.
They don't pay my bills. That's the way he works. But I remember the first thing I did was get a radio, put some subs, and get some rims. Whereas Preston, seeing me grow up, what was your
Ford Escort.
Ford Escort, right?
Well, I had a Tahoe until our dad sold it for a little amount of money. Just that's a sensitive subject. Yeah,
You
but
did
no,
something
I didn't.
wrong.
Yeah, right. No, I had a Ford Escort, and I was proud to drive that Ford Escort. Didn't even have a radio when we bought it. Get a little radio.
And seeing the different perspectives, and Preston, was that you seeing me and going, that stuff just isn't important?
Yeah, it was. I did see you go through it. So me growing up, I wore all your hand-me-down clothes until I stretched them out and couldn't wear them anymore. But I did. I wore hand-me-down clothes. Even to this day, I don't have that flash of wanting to have that. My emphasis is more on my family, more on, all of that. I mean, I grew up in a basketball community. I've been playing basketball since second grade, played at a high level, and that's, a heavily populated African-American community in the basketball world. And what we looked up to were all the athletes, all the professional athletes. And it's like you said, whenever they get successful, they go buy cars for their family, they go buy houses they go buy all of these things. And, a lot of people, they only see that. But if you listen to some of their stories and listen to what they did of these professional athletes, they'll tell you, like, I probably shouldn't have done that.
Right.
Probably shouldn't have bought all this, shouldn't have done all that, and all of their money's gone. What many people see is they see the stars, LeBron James. They see, all these guys that are making all this money. They don't realize that the average length in the league is only 3 to 5 years.
Right.
They think it's, everybody's making millions. No, a lot of those guys have normal jobs now.
Right.
They went in, they lost all their money, but us as kids, when we're basketball players, we want to be like them.
Right.
So we're wearing the same things they're doing. We're trying to wear their hair the way that they're wearing their hair, trying to get all the tattoos that they have. And what I teach my kids, because I'm a basketball coach as well, and I actually had a conversation with one of my kids. He's like, man, what do you think about kids getting tattoos at 16? I said, I don't agree with it. It doesn't make sense to me because you don't know the repercussions yet.
Right.
You haven't started working in this world. You don't understand that, but you see these athletes, they're already making millions. They're successful.
Right.
So a lot of kids growing up, they don't realize that that's, they're successful. You're not successful yet. You can't be them.
And I think to add to that, furthermore, another reason why we can't seem to grasp it is it's not what is being spread on the media.
That is true.
You don't see LeBron James sitting in a press conference talking about how he made it, how he had to manage his money, and how he had to look for the people that had his best interest and not keep the same posse and all the things that we know because we dig for those things. Instead, you hear about all the political stuff that he's trying to spread, and I think it bothers me what we use as clickbait versus an educational tool.
Right.
Our platforms as successful African Americans, and as we go up through the ranks, I think they're being, skewed, or obviously you get paid more to get more clicks, but I don't know, does it go back to what people want What do they want to hear? What do they want to see?
No, when I think about what's portrayed on the media, the U.S. is a consumer economy. If they're not spending that, and I've had a chance to visit India and the Philippines and some of the other countries, and they are definitely a saver economy. They will save
Sure.
every single dime as much as they can. But that's not here in the U.S. We measure wealth by the gross GDP, how much money we're spending. So if we're putting emphasis and focus on how we're spending, then we've got to give you a target to reach for. So here's that shiny new object that you need to buy, the PS5 or the PS9, whatever the PS thing is out there now. You got to get the new thing, where the thing that you had was perfectly fine. Let's look at Apple. The new iPhone comes out, everybody's trying to get an iPhone, right? My iPhone is an iPhone 11, and it still works.
It works just fine. That's right. That's right.
So I think that's part of it, because if Americans aren't spending, then the GDP goes down, and then we're starting to stress.
Here comes more media about going to buy more things and targeting our demographic. Why? Because we are the low-hanging fruit that will do it based on statistics thus far. How, and I don't want to get into it just yet, but on your side of the tracks, how did you make the conscious effort to go down a different road? Because I mean, and I'm going to bold statement, I believe just like we've got friends that went a different direction. And more of them than not are still in that direction, if that makes sense.
It's going to boil down to the parents. My parents, like I said, I grew up in the Bronx. We grew up in the hood.
Right.
And my father, he was an amazing man. He had a presence about him. There were certain things that he did that I emulated. I want to be like him. And then I looked at my mother and how hard she worked. So I think that gave me the vision and the work ethic to accomplish it. So when we moved to Laurelton, Queens, and we lived in a nice neighborhood, it was great seeing the same level of hustle in other families as well.
Absolutely.
So I think that's how I came to be where I am now. That level of hustle and just being the best you can be and how we accomplish it.
Right, and I think you had mentioned it before we started this, but it has a lot to do with mindset. And I can't even say if my parents weren't my parents, because they did instill a lot of that in us. But I'd like to think that if they weren't, I'd still seek that out. But then again, I don't know. I think it has to do with, it starts in the home. It starts within the household, and you tend to either try and duplicate what our parents did, or you try and do the complete opposite.
I was just gonna say that, people grow up in difficult situations, and if, one parent's an alcoholic, you're either gonna be an alcoholic or you're gonna shun it.
Correct.
So, it depends on the DNA of the person that's dealing with it. Some people are gonna succumb to what everybody else is doing, and others are gonna say, I'm gonna take a different route.
Right. Well, I want to bring it back to housing for just a moment, since we're still talking about this subject. I came across an alarming article that it was hard for me to comprehend. So I want your perspective on it. And it talks about they're finding that, and I think it was Redfin that did it, or CNBC, but they were talking about the value of a black homeowner versus a white homeowner. You will find about a $46,000 difference between the two. And they used a black neighborhood versus white neighborhood as the context. And in talking with my wife last night, she's a realtor as well, and knowing what I know, my first thought was location. What are your thoughts on why would that be the case? And do you think that's even possible to get that type of data with what we have?
That's a challenging question, because when that article came out, I kind of felt the same way. So here's what I do know. San Antonio is a different type of market. Because it's not as segmented as, let's say, New York. New York, you're on one side of the street, you're in a Jamaican neighborhood. Across the street, you're in a Jewish neighborhood. Down the street, you're in a Greek neighborhood. So I think it is easier to put, there's a term, biases. What's the term? Subconscious bias. Okay. I'm going in the hood, so let me.
Yep.
Straight. Yep. Tighten up. Hide my watch.
And that to me can affect home values. If I'm already
Sure.
I'm already nervous about being on the west side in San Antonio, if I can bring
Right.
it up. You know, and it is hard, however, to say that one house has African American art and you can tell the family there was black, they get a certain price, and then they take all the black art and they take everything out and appraises for higher.
And that's you're talking about the same
Yes,
article.
yes.
That's right.
As much as I say, nah, that can't be, but and a
Maybe.
significant difference.
Yeah,
It's
$100,000 difference, wasn't
Yes,
it, from that
yeah.
article? It was like 100 on that article, I believe.
Oh, was it? Even still, that's a big difference. And when I read it, I couldn't determine whether it was talking about a location, because they use the term black neighborhood, white neighborhood. Well, what the hell is a black neighborhood, white neighborhood anymore? I mean, I live in $1 million plus neighborhood, and my neighbor across the street's black. This one's Asian. These people are old white folks. And matter of fact, 2 doors down, they're black as well. So you're going to appraise my house, and that, what are we talking
So-
about? Is it apples to
So
apples?
here in San Antonio, it's more homogenized. You know, because we live in a military city, so it's harder to say I'm going to go to the Dominion and, you know, do a CML. I'm not going to do that house because they're black. I don't think that part happens. But if I
Right.
go to, let's say, the east side, where
Hmm.
the demographic is a lot more African American, and I look at homes
Sure.
over there compared to the homes over in, you know, a little further west, where, you know, same house, same square footage, and even the neighborhood around the surrounding houses is not drug ridden. It's neighborhood.
Correct.
They do have a heavier weight. I can't explain it. One of the things that I think affects the values is that, and I'm going to throw it out there, that the appraisers that are doing the appraisals are usually of one demographic.
That's very true.
Older white.
Matter of fact, I don't know any black
I
appraisers.
know too, but they're not here in San Antonio.
Okay, yeah, I was going to say, damn, I've been doing this for 10 years, and that's a good point. I don't know any black appraisers.
So the path to becoming an appraiser is challenging.
5
And
years.
then you have to, you know, partner with an appraiser.
Apprentice, absolutely.
And that's a hard path. That's a hard
Yeah,
path.
it is.
So I would love to see more diversity in that field, to see what the numbers
Mhm.
look like at that point in time.
And I'm hoping that by conversations like this, we can spread some diversity, because in my opinion, we are truly blessed to be in San Antonio because it is a melting
Right.
pot. I think back to your point about the segregation or segmentation, I believe that is a human nature about us. It's a human trait. For example, and I've said this before, let's say you put 100 men and women in a room together for a day. You're going to find that by the end of the day, the men will be here, the women will be there. If you take women out of the equation or men out of the equation, you have just men, then you're going to have, by the end of the day, age groups that are clicking. If you take age out of the way, then you're going to have races that
Right.
click. It's just a human nature thing to start to, I don't know, gravitate towards your like-minded, like culture, like age, like whatever it is. But the thing that we see in the media is talking about race all the time.
Right. And that's tough, you know, because again, that whole conversation can discourage those that are, you know, maybe I should buy a house. Oh man, you know, I'm gonna get discriminated against because I'm
Yeah.
black.
They're very apprehensive going into the process already. They're already scared to go into the process.
Because they hear that African Americans don't get approved at a higher rate, that your house is not going to get appraised for the same value. So it tends to discourage, which is disappointing.
And we have seen it. We have seen it firsthand that you have to almost educate African American demographic a little bit more upfront to get them to apply, to get them to take that next
Right.
step. Whereas white and even Hispanic, they've been coached, told, did the research. I don't know. And I'm not speaking for all black folks, because at the end of the day, we've got some black folks that know what the hell they're doing and they make it happen. But the larger demographic that we see, and I can attest just based on, we don't discriminate. We're equal housing lenders. And both myself and Preston get quite a bit of black folks applying. And our goal is to educate. Our goal is to share our screen and show them, look, you may have not been taught this stuff about your credit, but you're applying for a loan and you're late right now on things. That's not to discourage you, but it is to give you some context and perspective. My goal is to help you get all the way there. Are you willing to take those steps? Are you willing to sit down with me and go over your credit plan? Are you willing to start setting money aside for this? Are you willing to cut out of spending on your credit card on things you don't need? Re-educating, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes a whole bunch of sense because, like you said, when they first have the idea of buying a house, they have everything that their mom and them said and their cousin and them and, all of them's, right?
Yeah.
Unless you have the moral fortitude or the mental fortitude to say, I'm going to do this anyhow, it makes it challenging. So, having that realtor or that person who is the advocate for, hey, this is the right thing for you. This is what you should do. And here's how you do it. I tell my clients that, homeownership may be a 30-day process for you. Homeownership may be a 60-day process. Homeownership may be a 2-year process. But as long as you're on the path, we'll get you there.
I agree, and I love that. That is a testament to why you are where you are, and who knows where you're going to go and take your team and all that good stuff. But I think keeping that mindset and us adopting some of those things and preaching the same good word, I should say, is going to elevate our demographic. I think that's really the only way, because as we've mentioned in here, most of the time they don't get it in the household. So we've got to be those advocates. We've got to get things like this out to the public more and more. And how do you overpower the media? I don't know. We're going to try.
I think about this. What if everybody was on the same playing field from a financial perspective? What would that do to the economy? Where, everybody is at that, set
credit score higher. Yeah.
Everybody has the same opportunity for homeownership. Imagine what that would do to the economy.
I agree.
That's probably what drives me to help as much as I can.
Now, question, since you raised that point, if we were, now this is totally hypothetical and I hate hypothetical, but let's play. Next on Hypothetical Mission. Okay, so if we were to put everyone back on an even playing field, do you believe with the lack of education or the lack of appetite to want to have that education, do you think we'd still be back in the same place eventually?
We have to change our mindset. We have to start with, like I said before, not the 18-year-olds, but the 50. When do we start learning how money works? 12, 13. That's when the education starts.
Absolutely.
That's when we start talking about, and my daughter's 14. She wants to have a cookie business. Okay, well, let's talk about business. You have to have A, B, C, D, E. We're going to take some money and put it aside and build a business. So the education starts early as possible. And then once you are armed with it and you've been inundated with the rule of 72 and how to use credit and all these things, that when you turn 18 and get your first credit card, you're not going to go buck wild. So that's where we start. And, that's where SAREB is trying to help as much as possible by providing that education.
What is that? Go ahead,
SAREB
by
is
all means,
San
plug it.
Antonio Association of Real Estate Brokers. Our mission is to help minority families get into homeownership. We have a focus on the African American families, but we're democracy for all, and that's the important thing. I've been the president for the last 4 years. There's still work to be done, but I think we've done a lot of providing some level of exposure that there are successful realtors in San Antonio. There are successful minority families that are buying homes, and that is not as scary as it thinks. Sometimes the myths that we have to overcome is that I need 20% down to buy a house. I don't have 20% down, so I'm not going to buy a house. Okay. But you don't need 20% down. I need to have an 800 credit score to buy a house. You don't need 800 credit score. Homeownership is for those guys over there, because that's all I've seen, everybody over there buying houses. But, we know that it's available to everybody that has the desire to do so. And if you have the desire to do so, you partner with a trusted real estate professional, be it a lender, be it a realtor, be it, I don't know, whoever it is. You can,
mentor, sure.
You can accomplish that as well. I'm very passionate about that.
I love that. I really do. And I think that it is the best pick for this topic. And obviously, having had this discussion thus far, I was right. I was right. So, I mean, what are some other thoughts on how to elevate and educate more African Americans about homeownership. I mean, we talking maybe classes, educational things, but even still, I'd go as far as to say that that doesn't appease them, entertain that type of appetite that they have when you've got your LeBron James images flashing in front of them, things of that nature. How do we make home ownership cool?
I am noticing a shift. I'm noticing, especially with the millennial population,
Yeah.
that
Spell that one time.
that they're more open to it, but not necessarily from an ownership perspective for them, from an investment perspective.
I'm noticing that same shift. I've got a nice little circle, like I said, of the basketball community that I grew up with. I've got a nice little circle of friends that are actually teaching taxes and things. Or I'm sorry, stocks to their children, to their 7, 8, 9-year-old children. They're starting to teach that and trying to educate on stocks and things. And it's a shift that is changing that I'm noticing. And I mean, I'm the same way. When I was younger growing up, it was, I'm going to be an NBA player. And then I realized I'm only 5'11" and can't jump and dunk, and realized there were some things holding me back, but I didn't realize that until I was a junior in college. I still thought I was like, okay, I'm going to go play professionally. So now with my kids, they're 8 years old. My sports is not my biggest thing that I'm trying to teach them. I want them, when they ask me about my job, I don't go, don't worry about it. You don't need to know. I tell them everything about my job. If I'm on the phone, I'm on the phone in front of them so that they can hear me. They come to my office. They run around here. They're in my office seeing what I do.
And that's important because when you have those models of success, it gives you a target to shoot for. I'm going to tell you a picture about my father. I was in 4th grade or something. I don't know what grade I was. I was in trouble, I think. I don't know. Or just maybe a parent-teacher night.
That was me, 0 to 18.
But my dad had a presence about him. And when he walked in the room, he commanded respect. And I loved it. I'm like, shoot. Here I am, 55 years old, trying to figure out how to still get that. How do I get that secret sauce?
Yeah.
So just being able to present that to our kids, that it's more than just the basketball players. It's more than just the rappers. There are a lot of successful people that we can model ourselves after that are doing things in the community, that are not only successful at home, but successful in public. Those are the things that, if we can put those figures out there, I think that'll be important. Education and the classes that SAREB does, we do them for free. So anybody that wants to learn can learn if they reach out.
Before I jump into something that I just wrote down, you said that and it sparked something. You tell me your thoughts. I've noticed that when you give free classes, very few show up. But when you charge for that same class, more show up. Isn't that weird?
Value proposition. It's value.
It's just something in our mind that goes, okay, it must be valuable. Yeah, I'll pay my $20, whatever the case
But
may
if
be.
the price is too high, then they can't come.
Yeah.
Right. That's so true. That's so true. So what I wrote down here, y'all were talking a moment ago, in finding a way to elevate our demographic and all demographics, to be honest. We talk about it starts at home. But you're hearing you're hearing all this stuff about gender equality. You're hearing all this stuff about racial equality, racial inequality, racism, things of that nature that they're teaching or not teaching, and that's the debate. Should we teach it? Should we not? My thought is, scrap all of it. Let's talk about financial literacy. Let's talk about money. Let's talk about credit. Why aren't we talking about those things? Why aren't we fighting about getting that into schools more so than racial inequality and what our parents should be teaching us, if that makes sense?
That's a tough question to answer.
It is.
That's a tough question because
without getting too political.
Right. And I think part of it is, as a young man growing up, when things happen, when you see it on the news, and you don't know why it's happening, there has to be some level of, well, let me tell you what happens. And let me tell you from a even playing field, instead of me being, having the same experience, and let me tell you that cops are bad. Right. Or let me tell you that, the white man is this. Not all white people are bad, not all cops are bad, but those bad apples can permeate. So there has to be some level of conversation about that, be it in the home or in school or whatever. Along with that, let's close the door to that, but let's talk about how you're going to be successful when you turn 18, 19, 20. Let me teach you on how to use your money as, or use your credit as intentionally as possible to get the things you want to accomplish. Those are things that, I think they have to go kind of hand in hand.
And I'll agree with that. I definitely agree with that, especially because they can be played together. You can leverage and parlay those together. The reason why this is because of this, if that makes sense. And now so what are you going to do about it? Are you going to be the victim or the victor? And I think that hopefully this episode gets shared a whole bunch and maybe get some people upset about what we're saying, but at the same time, it puts it out in the open. It puts it out in the open from a perspective, and I don't have any indication or idea that any one of us has ill intentions of what we're talking
I'm going
about.
to tell you guys a story. So
Please.
when the iPhone 12 came out, or was it the 12 or the 13? I don't know. Something came out.
I don't even know which one they're at now.
So somebody put out a post that the money that you're paying for that iPhone 13 or whatever is 1/10 of your down payment for a house. And it totally went left. Well, who's to say how I'm going to use my money? And it just went.
Wow.
I was amazed at the.
Wow. Karens. Can we say that? No, my show, yes.
So Monique Slater, who's an excellent realtor, also came. Yeah, she's my vice president for SAREB. She was like, well, we should have classes on, how to, leverage this the right way. And I'm like, yeah, we should do that. We should find some way of, giving them the incentive to learn how to leverage your money. So one of the things that we're trying to work on with SAREB is if you can attend all these classes, and whether it be through HUD or, we kind of call it obtain, maintain, and retain homeownership.
Wow, that's very cool.
We do that all day. Here's how you buy a house. Here's how you build credit. Here's how you take care of your budget. The maintaining piece, now we got you in a home. Well, do you know how to change your air filters? Do you know how to, when something breaks, do you know how to fix that?
Right, because there's no landlord anymore.
Exactly. So, and that may be some of the fear, and I talk to people, my fear is it's too much of a responsibility. Well, somebody's got to fix it. It be you.
You're right.
So making sure that when they're in the home, how do we keep it going? So to maintain that value.
Sure.
And then at the end, there's the retain part. So how do you retain? Making sure you have good insurance, homeowners insurance, making sure that you have a will in place in case you pass away. What are the different things that can happen? Because the other part that hurts our generation or hurts our families is that when mom and them, they pass away and they had a house, the kids don't know what to do with it.
Right. They end up fighting over it so that I've seen it so many times, and recently I just saw it. Buddy of mine, I went to a baby shower 2 weekends ago, and we were talking about that exact subject. He said, my aunt passed away, left me as the executor, and everybody's fighting with me, and I don't know how to deal with it, Mark. And I told him, man, she left you in charge for a reason. You're the most financially stable. You're the one that should be doing the right thing when it comes time for that. So you've just got to explain it to them. All the others, explain it to them, because they are looking for a money grab, and they don't understand the bigger picture here. And when I broke it down for him, he was like, you know what? I needed to look at it from a different perspective because I was just getting hit by different angles and I just want my piece, And I get it. But you got to help others understand how you got to where you are.
So the other part of that conversation is the investor comes in and says, hey, I'll give you $50,000 cash for this house. And you're like, hey, great, $50,000. I've never had $50,000. Wow, that's fantastic, $50,000. And next thing you know, the house is on the market for $350,000, $250,000. If we collected the family together and fix it up, that $350,000 would be in the family. So obtain, maintain, and retain home ownership.
And that's what they talk about when they say generational wealth. We're not talking about an inventor gets millions and leaves it to his family. We're talking about the average Joe Schmo 80 years ago that bought a home, and then that home got passed down and got sold, and they moved that to another home, and it continued to grow this financial wealth that, no, you can't go and buy new cars with the wealth, but it's always going to be there. And it also imprints something in the next generation that this is the way it's supposed to be done.
Oh, I tie that in. So, when my kids get to a certain age, I may have to take out a home equity loan, and then I can use that to pay for college. So I don't have to do college student loans. that's
Or you can do like our parents and say, "Take care of yourself."
Still got those in there.
yeah. So
Yep.
that's
God, that was a good day when I paid those off. Sorry,
that's the
Pete.
generational wealth that we talk about. That it's long lasting and it goes for generations on end, which is something that we're striving for.
I agree. Well, I mean, guys, this has been a fantastic discussion. We are good on time. Is there anything else that you guys would like to add to cap this conversation off? I think there's been plenty of nuggets that we have dropped. I obviously, with good intentions, see that there is a way and solutions to the problems that are out there. It's more so, how do we get that to the masses? How do we make it cool? How do we make it something that you don't get instant gratification out of, but you know that there's going to be gratification someday? And just like you said, real estate is a long game. And I think we as millennials or Generation Z think that everything happens so quickly because we're used to it happening so quickly.
Right. That's a challenge because, like we said, it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen immediately. So I buy a house and now I got some money. No, you have to grow it. You asked how to get it out. One of the things that SAREP is trying to do is really work through the churches. There's a high level of African Americans who go to church on a regular basis on Sunday. So if we can partner with the churches in the neighborhood to provide this free information either before or after church, that would be a value add.
I agree. I definitely agree. Do you ever have opportunities where you put together financial literacy classes? I would love to jump in to be a speaker, to share my story. Preston, I'm sure, is willing to do the same thing. And maybe we start a movement. I think a movement starts with one, and then it trickles on to the next and to the next and next. But I do think it is something that is a necessity. There is a void for it. If there is education out there, it's not in a place, again, I keep referring back to it, that makes it cool. You're seeing more financial literacy younger, and I think it has a lot to do with TikTok and your Facebooks and your Instagrams of people like us putting the good content out there, right? So, I mean, who knows? Who knows? People may listen to this and think we're all full of it.
What's that saying where the little kids throwing the starfishes back in the water?
I never heard it.
So there's a little kid on the beach, and she's all these starfish around on the sand. And she was throwing them back, and there was like hundreds and thousands of them. And the guy was like, "Why are you doing it? You're not gonna make a difference." To that one, I did.
Oh, wow, that's deep right there, y'all.
If we can help one extra person get into home ownership or at least get on the path, mission accomplished.
Absolutely.
I agree. I mean, I refer to it as the spiderweb effect, or the ripple effect. You throw a pebble into the lake or in the water, it makes a ripple. And as you throw more pebbles, you can create ripples all over the place. And those ripples tend to have outlying, what is the context? They have additional effects trickling through, because you help somebody become a homeowner, they're going to want to tell their story to the folks that are close to them, and then it changes the narrative and makes it cool. I don't know,
Yeah, I know with NAREB there was an initiative for targeting millennials because there's a high level of millennials that are credit ready, mortgage ready, but don't. Why? Part of it may be, again, the instant gratification of being able to move when I want to, but now that the investing is becoming cool, that may be a path we can attack as well, or approach as well.
I agree. I mean, there was one thing that I forgot to mention in here, and it had to do with African Americans going to look for a home without an approval letter, and white realtor, black realtor, doesn't matter, won't take them to see it, but they will with a white person without a pre-approval. I call BS on the whole thing, because I'm going to ask you, when was the last time you took somebody to see somebody on a home without an approval letter? That wasn't a relative or a repeat customer.
It doesn't happen.
It doesn't happen. And I don't think that happened. Now, similar to anything else, you can find one or two or three scenarios and hone in on it and create the narrative for all. But I don't think that that's the mass. You can find it all over the place.
So did you guys see that Newsweek article that came out?
Which one? I read a lot.
So Newsweek did a study in Long Island
Okay.
where they had people of different races, same pre-qualification levels, well qualified. There was a higher percentage of those that were not African American or Hispanic that were able to go see homes with fewer barriers to the process, where those who were minorities had higher barriers. Well, we need to see a pre-approval letter, and so those to me talk about that subconscious bias. This person walks in and he doesn't look like he's ready to buy a
Right.
house, so I'm gonna put the wall up.
Shame on them.
It's the person, and unfortunately in Long Island there was a lot more people who
I'm
had
sure,
that mindset.
yeah.
I think here in San Antonio it's not as much.
I would say I could see that mindset sometimes because I used to work in the restaurant industry, and that was kind of when an African American walked in the restaurant industry, that's the perspective. They don't tip, and that's not a true perspective at all. But that's kind of the perspective that people get. So I could see how that may correlate with that in real estate. Shouldn't take anybody out without a pre-approval anyways. But I could see that.
I've got one last topic, and it can be a short one or we can draw it out. But I think it needs to be said, or at least I want to get perspective.
Sure.
And this is something that you came across recently, Preston. So I'm going to ask, no wrong answers to this, but let's say you overhear someone tell someone else, I only want to do business with black people. What are your thoughts? You overheard that. What is your opinion? What is your next move? Because I'll tell you mine after you go.
You should go first.
Regardless of what you say, I'm going to say exactly what I was going to say.
So the thought process is keeping business in the family.
Okay.
So if that person in the family understands my challenges and struggles and may be able to relate more effectively than somebody who's not in the family. So
I can definitely see that perspective, and I did not think about that.
That's where it is. So if I go to Preston and I know that you're half black, I know that I can say, hey man, what's up? And I had this problem, and not to say that my other races can't do that, but it's more likely that we have a commonality. And when you think about when you're doing business with people, the first thing is you got to like them.
Correct. Yeah.
So if I have a good vibe from you, I'm going to gravitate towards you. That's my perspective on it, just making sure.
And like I said, there's no wrong answers. It's just perspective. But I get what you're saying. I mean, if I go to anybody and say, hey, give me a dap, I bet we know what you're talking about, right? Now, taking that same perspective, same instance, but you overhear, I only want to do business with white people. That's racist, right? So why is it not the other way? And my answer or my response that I was going to say regardless was I would actually stop them and say, hey guys, you're doing what was done before. I'm not saying that that's wrong for you to only associate or do business with black people. I have no problem with that. But the concept that you're saying you only want to, what if this person is similar to you, more comparable to you, and better at their job, and they happen to be Asian, white, or Mexican? You're ruling them out. And if it were turned around, which it has been for many years in the past, we called that racism.
Right.
So do we not get to call ourselves racist? It's tough, right?
It's a tough conversation because when we talk about black business as a whole, there's a stereotype. Well,
you're right.
They're not going to be as professional. They're going to be whatever. So I do know that there is a desire to change that narrative.
Yeah.
And how do you change the narrative without soliciting and using their businesses?
That's true. That is very true.
So
I'm outspoken, and in those instances where I see that there can be a change made, I'll give my perspective because I am half and half to see if I can educate, because in the past, coming from white wife relatives had racism, things of that nature, I'd say they're just ignorant. They're living in their bubble. They haven't experienced me yet. They
Right.
haven't experienced this yet.
Right.
So I am a little bit more sympathetic to say, let me educate. If they're
Right.
open to it, I'm willing to.
Right.
The same concept with that, to a certain extent, it's like, this is an opportunity for me to educate if they're willing to listen.
Right. You know, I will say that with SAREB and Paris Realty Group, we did have several clients who were white said, I want to do business with a black woman. I want to do business with, your group because you're African American. Like,
That's changing the game right there.
Yeah, right?
Yes, absolutely. That's true.
so, it does go both ways. But yeah, trying to keep business in the family is, and when you look at other cultures, not even necessarily race, but when you think about, and again, I grew up in New York.
Right.
So you have these very close nuclear families where all the business is in the family, and that's all it is. So it's trying to catch up.
Yeah, and I do see that catch up thing. I guess for those out there that do think that way, maybe be open to more than that, only because, in my opinion, we need the white man, we need the Asian man, we need the Asian woman, we need the Hispanic person. And I think that's just us growing up in San Antonio, that it really, have I experienced racism? Absolutely. Was I able to overcome it? Absolutely. And it actually was a white person that came to my defense in the moments. And it gives me faith in humanity that there are more of us than there are of them now.
Right.
So we're making headway in that. It gives me faith that home ownership is, for African Americans, is absolutely more possible than we think.
Right. One of the spouses of in NAREB in North Carolina, no, she's in Nevada. Her husband, a white guy. You don't have to be black to support black families. I was like, wow,
That's strong. Yeah.
That was pretty cool.
That is strong. And I think sometimes people can go overboard with it. I don't know. I don't even want to go down that road. Is there anything else you guys would like to add to this? I think this is, again, has been super enlightening. I've gotten to see a different perspective from someone that I absolutely respect. So yeah, do you guys have anything else you'd like to share?
I mean, my biggest takeaway that I don't think we touched on fully, as part as the media goes, there are professionals in our field. There's professional realtors, there's professional lenders. So when media puts what they put out there, they leave out a lot of information. And I think that's what people need to understand, is that they're leaving out a lot of information. There's a lot of qualifications that go into getting into a home that professionals know and the media does not. So trust your professionals. Do not trust your media.
Right.
Totally agree with that.
Yeah. I think if you use the media as a means to start your researching journey, fantastic.
Yeah.
But if you use the media as a means to an end to formulate your opinion, shame on you.
I was going to say that when we use the term like-minded doesn't necessarily denote race, color, creed, sex, gender. As long as you're like-minded, we can partner together.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. Well, guys, this has been one of the best episodes, in my opinion, as far as insight, as far as perspective, as far as nuggets in regards to the perspective of what we do in our profession and how we are helping not just African Americans, but all consumers, not only educate, but accomplish the goal of homeownership. And we want to continue to spread that message. So if you are getting something out of this, please like, subscribe, share with a friend, and let this message soar through the media. Let's see if we can tone out the mis or disinformation that you're hearing about our demographic. Quit talking about our demographic like that, Brian, I want to thank you so much for joining us for this truly tough conversation to have. I applaud you for giving true insight to this. Preston, thank you so much for always giving honest opinion from your perspective. That being said, guys, I'm Mark Jones, your millennial mortgage expert. This is Key Factors Podcast, powered by ReviewMyMortgage.com, and we will catch you on the next one. Separate yourself widely from the pack moving forward. That's something that you would be willing to have discussion about?
Because they didn't get it. They were
Probably
like,
didn't
right.
get it.
To follow up with your clients to generate more leads. You know what I mean?
Always check to make sure you're recording.
The